Welcome to Gemara Shir. Welcome. Shabbos Kuf Chaf Vav Amud Beis at the very, very end of the Perek. Be'ezras Hashem. Today is the first night of Hanukkah. It's time to start new things. So we're going to finish in Mitzvah Hashem the Shir about Perek Kol HaKelim. We're going to finish Be'ezras Hashem Kol HaKelim, the last Mishnah and a few lines of Gemara. Then we're going to have another Shir about Hanukkah, the Gemara of Hanukkah. Says the Mishnah. Kol kisu hakelim sheyesh lam beis achiza nitolin b'Shabbos. All kisu hakelim, all covers, lids, yeah, all the lids and covers of the kelim that have a handle, nitolin b'Shabbos. You're allowed to take them, to carry them on and off on Shabbos. Why does it make a difference whether they have a beis achiza? One could claim, before we continue, that that's what makes them into a kli. Rashi, I'm following Rashi here. Rashi has an interesting shita here that something which is not kli of its own, it's only a kli because it serves another kli. It's kli lekli. Such a kli lekli we saw already is not mekabel tuma. A kli lekli is not so choshuv, but maybe if it has beis achiza, that makes it more important. Maybe. Okay, let's see what the Gemara has to say. Says Rabbi Yossi, no. When that is true, that the cover has to have a handle and otherwise you can't move it? When that is true? In completely different case, the kisui korkois, when you have like a sewage hole and you have an area in the ground which you want to cover, and that cover of the sewage of the ground, the pit in the ground, that cover has a handle, you can carry it. And without a handle, you cannot. Aval b'kisu kelim. But when you talk about kisu kelim, let's assume now kisu kelim is what? The cover of your pot, the cover of your frying pan. So reading the Mishnah superficially, before we get to the Gemara, what are we saying here? Says Rabbi Yossi, I'm not concerned about muktzeh b'chlal. In other words, when you talk about kisui kelim, what's the problem? The cover of the pot, the cover of the pan, the cover of the microwave thing, whatever, that cover, no problem. Carry it whichever you want. I'm not concerned. It's not muktzeh, it's a kli. When we have a din that you need to have a handle? No. That's when we talk about the kisur kolkois. Why kisur kolkois? Because we all know that the building always applies, the issur of building on Shabbos always applies to mechuber lakarka. When you have the ground and you have a hole in the ground, and that hole is the cover to the hole in the ground, what happens next? If there's no handle and you actually cover it with just the plain brick, with a plain, plate, just like that, it looks like you're building. I don't know if it's the Raisa or the Rabbanon. Rashi says, Havi boneh. Kisui of a pit looks like your boneh. Maybe it's even more. It's at least the Rabbanon, if not the Raisa. I would say it's the Rabbanon because it's Arai. Even that's not so pashut. We're not going there. But the main point is, there's an Isser of boneh to one level. But the pot, nobody would say the pot is an issue of boneh, right? And therefore, by pot, it's not a problem. But the Tanakama says, that's Rabbi Yossi who's lenient. Tanakama, more machmir, says, no, every pot has to have a handle, and that avoids it not from boneh, it avoids it from being muktzeh. Otherwise, it's muktzeh. Very soon, everything is going to get a bit different and much clearer. Now, Rabbi Yochanan comes, and we saw this Rabbi Yochanan before. Rabbi Yochanan is coming with a big, with a qualification of the Mishnah. Amar Yehuda Bar Shila, Amar Basi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Vehu sheyesh teres kli aleihem. Oh, the Reisha, as we said yesterday, when you're allowed to place the lid and move up and down the lid on your pot, only when that lid has another usage besides being the kli of the pot. Yeah. In other words, if you have kisui kelim, right? Kisui kelim alone is muktzeh. According to Rashi, it's kli for a kli. Only if it has its own purpose. Let's say the cover of the lid, the lid of the pot, has another shimush as a tray, or something to cut with, or the chopping board. Then it's a star in its own right. Good, very good. Then it's not muktzeh. But then the question is, if it's not muktzeh anymore, why do you need the lid? And why do you need the handle on the lid? Why did Tanakama say I need the handle? I don't care anymore. It's a kli. It's a kli in its own right. We just resolved the whole muktzeh issue. So why is it that the Kama requires a handle, and what's Rabbi Yosef and the Kama arguing about at all? Now comes the final answer, the final solution. The Kula Alma, says the Gemara, everyone agrees, now a whole new pshat, and that's a pshat la'alochim. Everyone, both the Nakama who is machmir and requires a handle, and Rabbi Yossi that doesn't require a handle, the Kula Alma Kisui Kolkois. Oh, let's talk about two separate, or actually three separate cases. Karka, Kli, and somewhere in between. Nice and slow. The Kula Alma, Kisui Kolkois, if you have the kisui of the actual ground, you have a floor in your house, you have a sewage hole, a manhole, and you have a cover over there. Everyone agrees that im yesh lan beis achiza in iloi iloi. Very good. Everyone agrees that you have to have a handle, and if you don't have it, you're not allowed to build. Build, because if you just stuff it with your cover, we have one in our kitchen. Yeah, sometimes we need to cover it again. If you cover it on Shabbos without a handle, it looks like your boneh. It doesn't look it's supposed to be on and off. It looks like another brick which you're going to live there forever and ever, right? So at least in the Rabbanan it's boneh, and everyone agrees to that. Now let's go to the other extreme, the lenient case. Kisui hakelim, pots, pans. Afal gavdein lebeis achiza, of course. A pot, there's no boneh in pot, and bin in the stir bekelim. And even if there is, according to Tosis and other Rishonim, that's when you really build it. But to cover a pot to say that's boneh, that's insane. That's super overfrum, right? So of course, nobody requires they should have a beis achiza. It doesn't look like I'm building when I'm covering a pot. So what's the machlekes? When did they argue? As always, they argue in the middle of the road case. Keep ligi. When do they argue? Rabbi Yosef Chacham B'Siyata Dishmaya. The kelim the chavrinu ba'ara. Oh, you have kelim that are not completely sunk into the ground, like the bor v'dus. These are kelim that are connected to the ground. Let's say you have a pot that you connected to the ground. Don't think of today's modern pot. Think of an old-time pot made out of cheres. You connect it to the ground. What did you make? A tanur. Let's say, yeah, that's tanur. A tanur is 3D. It's above ground. It's a kli. You connected it to the ground. Yeah? Or any other kli that you connected to the ground. Here comes the kshaila. Masova gazrina and masova lo gazrina. Very good. According to Mandoma Gazrina, that's Tanakama. Let's say you have a kli. It's above ground. Everybody sees it's a kli, but it's connected to the ground. Is it a kli or is it part of the ground? That's a good question. Tanakama tells you, I'm goizer. What's a gzeil? If you want to take a lid and cover the top of that oven, let's say, or that, I don't know, any construction that's connected to the ground, but is a kli, then you have to have a handle over the lid, because gezerah atu, a regular lid of a pot, goes to this kli atu atu the ground. Excuse me. I meant to say sorry. Atu the ground. In other words, you have a kli above ground, which everyone can see is not really part of the ground. It's 1 meter high. Yeah. But if you start covering that without a handle, next time you know what's going to happen? You're going to have another kli sunk into the ground, like built in, right? I remember the first time they brought built-in ovens to Israel. Big invention, yeah? Things are built into the wall was the Chiddush, yeah? So let's say you have an oven that's outside the ground, yeah? And you cover it. Next time you get the new technology, which is the tanur sunk into the ground, then you'll come to confuse them. And the one that's sunk in the ground for sure is also the Kula. Everyone agrees that you need a handle, because that's mamish looking like you're born at the ground itself. It's one nice surface level with the ground. Rabbi Yossi says, I'm not worried. Rabbi Yossi says, no, lo gazrinan. Says Rabbi Yossi, no, as long as it's a kli, even though it's a kli that's connected to the ground, I'm not so concerned that if you cover a new without a handle, just cover in a way that seems more permanent. If you do it to the kli above ground, you will not between this and the one below ground. Lishnachrina, this is a very unique lishnachrina. Lishnachrina here is not arguing in the first one. Unbelievable. The Mashal says Lishna Achin is an exception to the rule. It means the same thing, just styled differently. Same idea, styled in a different language. Stylistically, it's different. Ki pligi b'kisu itanu, it's just actually more clear. They're covering about a cover of, they argue about the cover of the Tanu, as I told you. Mal medamel l'kisu karka, u'mal medamel l'kisu kelim. Very clear. The one who's machmir says, listen, scratch our heads. It's a kli that's connected to the ground. Uh-oh. So mar medamel l'kisu karka. It is connected to the ground. And if you start, yeah, playing around with the cover of such a tanu that's connected to the ground, you know what it's going to do next Shabbos? You'll cover the tanu or any other hole that's in the ground. And that's for sure a problem. Says Rabbi Yossi, I'm not concerned about that. A tanu, since it's a kli above ground, it's more similar to pots and pans and cupboards that have a cover on top, which is nothing to do with the ground. And there, everyone agrees we don't need to have a handle, and therefore you don't have, and here too, you don't have to have a handle. That's a machlokes. Hadamach kol kelim, guys, we did it. Baruch Hashem. Let's do Chanukah's Abayis, meaning Chanukah of the Mefani. No, I don't want to start the new parak because now we have Chanukah. We're going to have some days off, so we can learn now the sugi of Chanukah. That's in a start a new recording. So those of us on Torah Anytime should are invited to watch the other movie about Chanukah, the other clip about Chanukah. 1 second.